Hi, this is Frank Casascio, and this is the Hank Cisco Show, so don't touch that dial. Today I'm honored to have two people from the American Legion Post 769 up in Penland. But before we go that, this is really interesting because this year, 2019, is the 100th anniversary of the American Legion Post, and we're going to get a little bit of history background on it. The name of the post is the Daniel W. Downing post, and we're going to learn a little bit about him and how far back he goes. So just fasten your seatbelts. You're in for a wonderful time to learn a little bit about history and the history of our area. So first we've got the finance chairman of the lodge, Mr. Rudy Albert. He's one of the youngest members in the club, in the chapter. And we have the Fred Connors, who is the local historian of the club. The one problem I've got is I'm an Army guy for 6 years. These guys are Marines. So we've got a problem getting started off the elevator. But anyhow, so Rudy, let me ask you this. What does it mean to be a member of this lodge, and how has it impacted on your life?
Well, to me it means a lot because we're community-based. We're doing a lot to help the community, to help the kids, and to foster camaraderie. So I like to see this, and it keeps things peaceful.
So not only, and I know you served for a number of years in the Marine Corps. In fact, you have a very interesting story, which I want to get back to that in a little bit. But I think the real big thing is it's the 100th anniversary. You've got a lot of different things going on during the course of the year. You have Memorial Day coming up, and you guys do something very special on Memorial Day. Why don't you talk about that a little bit? You do something with
we
that.
have to honor our fallen soldiers that came ahead of us. This is one way of doing it. We want to see to it that their graves are covered by the flag because they sacrificed their life to keep us free. And we're trying to bring this to the forefront so that they're never forgotten.
I know that, and this is something very dear to me, I go down to, and I know you can relate to this because we're both of the Vietnam era, although I missed going to Vietnam by 2 weeks, and I know you actually got kind of an interesting story how you wound up getting there, but no, when you look at that wall and you see all the men and women that are on that wall, we should never forget those people. It makes me mad at the same time because, there was no, given what happened in history, you just say, boy, was that a waste of life? But we can't look at that in that way. We have to remember what these men and women did.
That's right.
And we have to keep them alive. And it's so easy for young people not to understand from the founding of this country to today's time, there has always been men and women that are willing to put their lives on the line for this belief in the American system. And I think that's real important. So what you do and your representation of what, putting the flags on is really important to me. I'm going to ask Fred a question. Fred, you joined right after you got out of the service, I'm sure, Rudy, right? Right after you got out is when you joined the American Legion Post here?
That's hard to answer.
It's hard. So did you know about this American Legion Post before you went?
I knew of it, but I did not know what they were doing. So I didn't bother to join for a long time. And then when I did join the American Legion, I joined the holding post that we have in Harrisburg for the state of Pennsylvania. It wasn't until several months later that I got a letter from them saying, hey, consider joining a post in your area and get involved with some of the things that they're doing. That's when I learned that this was a community-based post more than anything. And they do so much for the community, and here I am.
Yes, and you were there. And we'll get into some of the things that they do for that. And I'd like to ask Fred. Now, Fred has a kind of unique role. Besides being a businessman in his own right, he is the historian of the Post, and he's also serves on the Whipping Board of Supervisors, and he's a chairman. So his relationship has many different levels, from business to government to the fact that he's in the historical. Tell me a little bit more about the history of the Daniel W. Downing Post and who it's named after and how all that happened.
Yeah, so that's a great segue. Rudy's story is the same as mine. After I left the Marine Corps in '99, it took me a while to find the Legion and find this jewel of the greater Ambler, Whitpin Township, Lower Gwinnett community. And it's since 1945, the Daniel W. Dowling Post, 769, has been a mainstay of our community. So my role as chair of the board of Whitpin Township, and eventually became the historian of Post 769. It's a great synergy there, because I get to be with comrades like Rudy and so many, almost 100 members of the community. And then I get to...
You are not the only Marines, right?
We have
a few other Marines.
There's a few good Marines there. Yeah, in fact, our commander, Mark Futch, is a Marine as well. So why this post is so important, and why really veteran services organizations are so important, is because we have to take care of our veterans, have to take care of their health needs and all that. We have to tell their stories, the stories of the great wars, the great battles, and represent what we did and what we served, so that others will serve and will come behind us. So that's one of the missions of the American Legion too, and they've been doing it for 100 years. This very month is the 100th anniversary of the founding of the American Legion. Right at the end of World War I in Paris, veterans got together and they said, how do we continue this camaraderie? How do we continue to work together? And the American Legion was founded in Paris in 1919. So we're celebrating that at our post this year.
Do you know how many American Legion posts there are?
I have to look at my notes. There's thousands around the world.
And it's not just confined to the United States, they exist in other formats too.
Yeah.
So tell me, what I understand, Daniel W. Downing fought in the Civil War.
Yeah.
And so the chapter's named after him. Mm-hmm. Can you give me a little bit more insight about
So being a historian of Post 769 normally means that people say, hey, Fred, what was that guy's name? But I've done some research and over years have gotten to know the story and know it well of the founding of our post. So, of course, the post was founded by 18 African Americans returning from World War II. They lived in Ambler, Penlyn, Whippin, Bluebell, those areas. And, of course, then the military was segregated. And
it was 1947. 47 when Truman integrated all the military.
So in the Ambler area, for instance, there were 3 posts. Actually, there were 4 posts. 3 white posts and 1 black post. And that black post, founded by those 18 African Americans returning from World War II, was built with their hands over a 3-year period, so about 1946 to 49, and that's the post, the building that we still occupy.
And that ground was owned, where was the ground?
Yeah, so the original owner of the ground was the large asbestos manufacturer known as Keesby Madison. They deeded the the land that our post is on, and it's been in the hands of the American Legion Post ever since. So as they built the post, it came time to, they got the number designator of 769 from the district, the Department of Pennsylvania, which is in the hierarchy of the American Legion. The department is each state headquarters. So they got the designator of 769 from the Pennsylvania Department of the American Legion, and then they had to pick a name. Who would be the namesake? Who would best represent that legacy, that lineage? And they settled on a gentleman named Daniel W. Dowling, who was from Penn Lynn. He was a farmer or sharecropper in the 1950s, and he volunteered for the Civil War.
In the 1850s.
I'm sorry, in the 1850s, sorry.
Okay.
Volunteered to serve in the Union Army, one of the Pennsylvania regiments of
Now, most of those members of the Pennsylvania regiments, I know this, trained in Lamont area of Cheltenham. That was an area owned by Lucretia Lamont,
right.
who was one of the very strong Republican women advocates of abolitionists. And she was a radical abolitionist for the most part, considered back then as radical, and fought like heck. So she donated a lot of her estate to setting up the camp. And actually that, in Lamont, when you drive there and you're there, the streets are all set up when you drive through it, just like a military camp, because that's where the tents were. So it's very interesting. But go ahead, Fred.
Yeah, so when it came time to settle on a name, that was an obvious one.
Yes.
And the Dowling Post was formed, and it was even more apt to name it after the Dowling Post, because Daniel W. Dowling's grandson, Charles Dowling, was an Ambler resident, and he went off to World War I and served in World War I with one of the African-American units there. Not quite sure if he was in the Harlem Hellfighters, which is a notorious fighting unit from the regiments from New York. Again, our records are not the best, and we continue to do our research, but named after the Dowling family. Those and over 100 more African-American veterans are buried in the Rose Valley Cemetery, just outside of Ambler, off of Butler Pike. The Rose Valley Cemetery is slightly down the hill from the Rose Hill Cemetery.
Were these just military cemeteries, or was it a community cemetery?
Community cemetery, separated by a wall and separated by color.
So back in those days, and I recognize, reading the history of our country, although we have a tortured existence to a certain degree, we've always been able to seem to forget and move forward and try each step of the way, get better and better at relationships. But I assume those cemeteries were established way back when, because Penn Lynn, that's a fairly old farming community, so they kept it separated. I would assume that's, and the veterans' names on all the different tombstones. I assume there was white veterans that are up in one area and the other area. They don't separate it today, do they?
No, well, not really. I recall when I was in the reserves, we did a parade in Roxborough. And as we're going through Roxborough, the people are whistling and yelling and come to the post after the parade. Okay, so I go to the post, knock on the door. It's a white post. They said, "You got the wrong place." So they told us where it was, and that doesn't happen anymore. Our post is integrated, and we get along super well. That's why he's the
historian.
Yeah, I met him and we talked, and I said, "You would make a great historian."
Yeah, I would agree with you, knowing Fred as I do. He does we have some great discussions on historical stuff. So, because, our country is history for all practical purposes. But it is interesting how things have changed
Yes.
in so many, we hear bad stories, but yet things are so much better than I think we're starting to get there
Yes.
as a country and as human beings.
Yeah.
Which is the most important
To
thing.
tell you another story, while I was on active duty, I was stationed in the South most of the time, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, and that was the days of segregation.
Yeah, sundown cities and things like that, right?
And the only place that the black fellows could go was the USO. We had no other clubs. We had no bars. We had to go to the USO. That's why today, like the Tuskegee Airmen, I support the USO whenever I can, because they provided a place for us to relax.
Right. And those USOs had both black and white soldiers and all races and
Yeah.
religions there. So the USO did serve a purpose to help. And that's one of the stories that starts
That's right.
breaking down the barriers and bringing us together as people. One of the things I want to ask you is, Rudy, you talk about the fact that the post, yes, it's for military people, you get together and you commiserate different stories and things like that, and you're good friends. But it does something else you talk about, which is real important. It talks about the community and the importance of the community, because that's what really attracted you to get there. The one thing that I know that you have is once a year you have a huge dinner celebrating Martin Luther King's birthday, and that raises a lot of money for scholarship. Why don't you talk about some of the events during the course of the year that contribute to the community and for better understanding amongst
Okay.
people?
Okay. Well, over and above the Martin Luther King breakfast and the money raised from that breakfast supports the children, the scholarships. We last year we gave away 9 scholarships, 9 kids. That to me is great.
$20,000.
Yeah.
$20,000,
Yeah.
that's a considerable sum to give
Yeah.
away. So I have a little brochure about the, if I don't know if the camera can close in on that a little bit and see what they can do on getting a picture of that. So put your order in now for the 21st of January, because it does sell out, because they do a great job. And they have great speakers, and it's a great way for communities to come together of all persuasions.
Yeah, and so it's a breakfast. Now we've grown so large, this will be our 13th anniversary year of the breakfast. And we've moved to Normandy Farms in Bluebell. And it's really now become a day of service. So we partner with the Wissahickon High School and their CASA club, the African American, Hispanic American clubs. And they come and join us, and it's the kickoff of a full day breakfast and then community service events throughout the day. So it's a great event, and it's really a powerful experience to anybody who comes there.
And then you have the Memorial Day ceremony, which is coming up, which you talked briefly about, the Rose Valley cemeteries, putting flags on all the veterans' graves, which is really important. And then you have, this is one thing that gets me going, you have a military enlistment recognition day.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about that. Who wants to take that question? Who wants to, you want to handle that, Fred?
Sure. It's Rudy's John Muir. We do it again, or of the community. Our mission is to take care of veterans and serve our community. So as a community service organization, community service partner. So one of those organizations is the Wissahickon High School and the Wissahickon School District. So a couple of years ago, the superintendent and I were talking about how we should be recognizing not only our kids going to college, which is great, and they should, and Wissahickon does a great job sending off students to college, but we should also recognize those that are going to volunteer in our all-volunteer military and go off and serve in uniform, serve their country. So this will be our 4th year, I think, coming up the Friday before Memorial Day. We will recognize those young people who are going to enlist or go off to a service academy. And we make them honorary members of the post. We give them a certificate. We talk a little bit about service, and we thank them for putting their hand up, raising the right hand, and saying, "I will serve." And it's again another powerful event that we get to share in. And we're getting a little up there in age, but to see the young kids, who could have went to college, could have did anything, but they're gonna go off and serve their country.
Getting up there in age.
You're doing great, man, let me tell you. And then you have, this is something, Rudy, you might want to tell you, the Keystone Boys State and Girls State sponsorships. What do you do for that?
Now, I've not been involved with that end of it very much, but I do get involved with the Boy Scouts of America.
So this is relating to Boy Scouts and Girl Scouting. And
Memorial Day is coming up, and we will get help from the Boy Scouts in planting the flags. So we're teaching them the things that we've learned, and they're helping us by.
And then they're also understanding that there's a legacy there, that there are people that have got them to where they are today that were before them, so that's important too. Veterans Day ceremonies, I'm sure that's a very important aspect for all of us who have served in the past. And then I understand you do a couple of real special things for the Christmas and holiday season areas. So you want to talk about your different programs you have for that?
2 years ago, we had approximately 50 kids to come to the post to collect toys that were donated by Toys for Tots, which is part of the Marine Corps' function to the public. The last one we had, that had grown to almost 100 kids.
So 100 kids coming in now.
The word is out that what we're doing, and we're starting to see the benefit of it now.
Can people donate toys directly to the post?
So, yeah, we do. We try to focus everybody focuses on their mission. The Toys for Tots program is a long-time program of the Marine Corps Reserve, and the Marine Corps League post down in Glenside or Abington. They collect the toys, and that's where we've gotten them for years. And now it's become such a great community event. Lots of kids from kids that need some help, families need some help, and to just make it a little better Christmas, they come down and they join us for that Christmas party, and it's a wonderful event.
So what you'll see when you're watching this show, we'll put the information on the bottom of the screen for you so you can contact them. If you've got some toys, even in January or July, in the heat of the summer, if you've got some toys, you're cleaning out the attic or something like that and you don't need them anymore, just wander down to post 769 and they'll be glad to take them and set them aside for the Christmas coming up. And that'd be a great thing to do if you got any toys hanging around. I know I have a lot of toys from grandkids that are now not that they're grown up and they aren't going to be using them. So you might be seeing me at your post with a couple of toys as I clean them out. And then you have going home services, which can be. We've all seen those moments, and I know. And not to put a plug in for one of the news stations, but I know there's one station that when they get certain films of service people coming home to seeing their kids or seeing their parents or something they haven't seen for a while, very emotional. Do you do any of that kind of stuff, or do you help people who somebody might call and say, hey, I'm coming home, I want to surprise my parents? Have you ever had those?
Yeah, so we've done that for veterans who've been off at war or come home. So that's coming home. What we mean by the going home services is when one of our brothers passes away. We just had one last week. We go to the service. We go to the cemetery, and we help them make it home. So we stand at attention at the casket, make sure all the arrangements are carried out with a military precision that we can manage these days. Make sure the flag is properly displayed and folded and presented to the family. So that's what we mean by going home services, and we do that for our members for sure, other veterans in the area, and then for active duty military. Whenever there's ever someone that is killed overseas or while on active duty, we make a point of getting as many of us to come out to those services. In fact, about a month ago, a Marine pilot from Ambler was killed in a training accident. So we made sure that we were there to honor his service and continue to tell the story of veterans and the sacrifice that they and their family make.
Yeah, they're always, having attended a few of those, are always tough. Do you, recently a friend of mine, her father passed away, and he was a veteran of World War II. I believe he was in the Battle of the Bulge, but I won't hold me to that. If you're watching, I apologize if I made the mistake, but I know he was in a couple of battles, because I remember talking to him, and he passed away. And he is going to be buried in Arlington Cemetery. Do you go down as a group to honor any members of your Legion Post to go to Arlington Cemetery if that occasion arose for any of your members? Do you do those type? Has that happened yet in your Legion Post?
Not in my experience. I think we certainly would do that, and we had talked about making it to Arlington or the other military cemeteries. There's one in Washington's Crossing, and every holiday season, Christmas season, there's a great program that wreaths across America. Some of our members have participated in that. At Arlington, they put a wreath at every gravesite, and they do that at the Washington Crossing Cemetery as well. But yeah, we're trying to recruit new members to help us do more community service. So there's a limited number in the manpower forces we can deploy, but that's certainly one of the things that we try to do.
So one of the messages here today is, hey, if you're a veteran and you're in your area and you want to join a great club, not a club, but a great organization, is really committed to community service and the community and understanding between everybody, this is the place to join, which is the American Legion Post 769. What's the address of the post itself, the exact address?
Maple Avenue, and you're going to challenge me for the number. Maple Avenue
You can
in...
cheat, you can look.
351.
Is it 351?
It's down the street to the left, and you see the gas station,
West Maple Avenue in Ambler, Pennsylvania. Or I guess more importantly these days, Ambler Post 769 on the internet. You can Google us.
Actually, not that far from me. I'm not that far from Ambler itself. A couple other things that, just talking about American Legion Post overseas, what do they serve functions for, the American Legion Posts that are in other countries?
Yeah. So wherever there's veterans, veterans get together. There's VFWs or American Legions, and I can't recall.
So if I decided, I'm Italian, so if I decided to move to Italy and hang in Italy, there might be an American Legion Post in a town near me, and I could go over and say, hey, I fought and go there. Is that how that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so one of the oldest overseas posts is in Paris.
That's where it started, right?
Where it started, yeah.
I guess those guys didn't come back home.
Yeah.
Once in Paris, they stayed in Paris, huh?
Yeah, in U.S. military, it used to, now we bring our service members who fall in battle, we bring them home, and they're buried here. But for many of our wars, certainly through World War II, our brethren, overseas military cemeteries, they fall where they lay, and that's the only ground that America asked for in return for going to defend Europe or the Pacific, was not land for conquest or empire, but just a small plot, so that we can have our service members who fall.
I would assume, maybe I shouldn't assume, but I've experienced Normandy and been there, and I've been through that cemetery. And I remember taking my daughter, I had two daughters, one came with me, my other daughter was studying at the Sorbonne in Paris, and we did a trip to Normandy because I'm like a historical nut, so I told my daughter, let's go, we're going to go to Normandy. And one of the things was that she was struck by the cemetery there. And I said, well, you see all these men here, let's go down to the waterfront. So we went down to the beach, Omaha Beach, and I said, okay, picture you running from here up there with 50 caliber machine guns shooting at you, bombs going off, wire and everything else, guys falling. What do you think? She looks at me and she says, Dad, they were the bravest guys in the world, or they were absolutely crazy. Yeah. And I said, well, it's probably more like bravery than anything else like that. And she had a whole different feeling as to that. That short trip told her more about the men and women who gave so much for this country, and experiencing that was pretty awesome for her to see that. And I wish everybody had that opportunity to do that.
I'll tell you one more thing as we get close to closing here. Next week, again, the Friday before Memorial Day, we're going to participate in a dedication of a new memorial at the Wissahickon High School that we work with. Lots of money was raised, and beautiful monument that we'll dedicate on the Friday before Memorial Day. And the inscription on it, of course, is, we'll remain the home of the free as long as we're the land of the brave. And to your point, those young men and now men and women across the world that wear the uniform, that raise their right hand and go off and serve, those brave people are why we remain the home of the free.
Recently I know you were there, and I know you wanted to attend it, Rudy, but you couldn't do it. There was the huge celebration of the Tuskegee pilots. I know you have a certain, feeling toward the Tuskegees. They've come and spoken at the Post several times. But those gentlemen, that particular day was very meaningful for a lot of people, and it was a very diverse group that was there. And I think the camaraderie that was there that day was pretty awesome as far as I was concerned and what I saw there. But I know the Tuskegees were very important to you, and you had occasion to meet some of these men who really, went way beyond to prove something. So what's your feeling about the Tuskegees? You and I talked about this a little bit. So tell me about your relationship with them. What they meant to you as an individual going into the military.
I don't know how to answer that either.
I would assume as someone growing up in an era where there was still quite a bit of segregation and everything else.
Yes.
And
yes.
Seeing what they...
We've seen, I've seen both parts of it. Mm-hmm. Being in the South, being raised in the North, I've seen how it came to be. Mm-hmm. And the changes that have taken place since then. It's been phenomenal. Still a long ways to go.
Yes. Yeah,
we're not there yet, but it's a blessing.
I often said it's in human nature. It seems to be easier for people to criticize and be standoffish than to accept someone because just of human nature that we have, and it takes a certain amount of total trust to do that. And for me, when I learned about the Tuskegee experience,
yes.
It was like, I even questioned whether I'd be willing to die for my country that wouldn't accept me as a man. I mean, that would be my first thing, but yet they did, and they moved that dial one click. So we all have an opportunity to do that. I think that's important. Anything else you would like to add for the show today to let people know a little bit more about...
Well, the one point I want to bring out is that the American Legion is made up of all branches of the military service. Not just the Marine Corps that we talked about, not just the Army, but all branches. They bring us all together in camaraderie, one group, to serve a main purpose of seeing that everything runs smooth.
And I think that's the nature of what we want to create in our society anyhow, so
Yes.
it really is a microcosm of what we want to really do. And if you can do it there, why can't we do it everywhere? That's my feeling. Ladies and gentlemen, it was a great interview today. I hope you learned something about it. Don't forget, if you got some toys, get them over to the American Legion Post at 769 on, what was that street?
Maple Avenue.
Maple Avenue.
West Maple Avenue.
West Maple Avenue, right down the street from the, no, I'm only kidding about that. But they get it over there, and they'll be great to accept it, and find out about it. And if you know somebody who's in the military, or is retired from the military, get them over to the Post. I think you'll find it a wonderful experience there. So I'd like to thank you for coming.
Thanks for
Fred,
having us, Dan.
Rudy, great.
Great.
Good
Thank
luck to you. Stay young. Keep that in mind, okay? Keep kicking. And that's it for today. We will see you next time. Thank you.